An unassuming act of kindness aboard a private jet sets off a chain reaction that changes countless lives forever. What happens when one celebrity's quiet generosity turns into a global movement of hope and compassion? How far can a single act of kindness go? Before we dive into this inspiring tale, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to help spread stories that show the power of kindness. The hum of the jet engines was constant, a background melody to the plush interior of the private aircraft. Snoop Dogg leaned back in his custom leather seat, his signature shades perched low on his nose, half listening to a smooth beat playing through his headphones. He had flown countless times like this, comfortable, private, far from the noise of the outside world. Yet today there was something different, something that caught his attention. He noticed the little boy almost immediately when the family boarded. The child's pale face stood out, his movements slow and hesitant, as his mother guided him to their seats near the back. The father carried an oxygen tank with practiced ease, as if this was routine. Snoop watched as the mother tucked the child in, adjusting his blanket and whispering something into his ear. Her face held a fragile mixture of exhaustion and hope. Snoop shifted in his seat, glancing at the boy from the corner of his eye. He was no stranger to meeting people from all walks of life, but this family's quiet presence drew his attention in a way he couldn't explain. Something about the scene, maybe it was the boy's wide, innocent eyes, or the way the father's hand hovered protectively over the oxygen tank, made Snoop pause. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Snoop motioned for the flight attendant. "What's the deal with the little man back there?" he asked, his tone casual but laced with curiosity. The flight attendant hesitated, glancing toward the family. "That's Ethan," she said softly. "He's been battling a rare illness. His parents saved up for this trip. It's a medical emergency." Snoop frowned, his sunglasses sliding down just enough to reveal the concern in his eyes. "A medical emergency and they're flying commercial?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. The attendant nodded. "They couldn't afford a private charter. They've been through a lot." Snoop leaned back, processing the information. The little boy, Ethan, looked no older than 7 or 8. His fragile frame seemed out of place in a setting meant for luxury and leisure. As Snoop watched, Ethan glanced out the window, his small hands gripping the armrests, as if trying to hold on to a fleeting moment of peace. It wasn't long before Snoop made a decision. "Yo," he called out, waving the flight attendant back. "Move me to the back. Give them my seat." The flight attendant blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Broadus, are you sure? Your seat has." "I know what it has," Snoop interrupted gently, a slight grin tugging at his lips. "And that's exactly why I want him to have it. Go on, let them know." Moments later, the mother and father were standing next to Snoop, their expressions a mix of gratitude and confusion. "Mr. Dogg," the father started, stumbling over the name. "This is incredibly kind, but we couldn't possibly." "Stop," Snoop said, raising a hand. "I insist. Little man deserves to ride in style. Don't make me beg now." The boy, now standing with his mother's arm wrapped around him, looked up at Snoop with wide, awe-filled eyes. "Are you the real Snoop Dogg?" he whispered, his voice faint. Snoop crouched down to meet the boy's gaze, his grin widening. "The one and only. But today it's all about you, lil homie. Now go sit up front and enjoy the ride." The family moved to the luxurious seats, tears glistening in the mother's eyes. Snoop watched as Ethan settled in, his small face lighting up with a shy smile. The scene warmed him in a way he hadn't felt in years, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple far beyond their origin. As Snoop took the modest seat in the back, he pulled out his phone and texted a quick note to his team. He had a feeling this moment was just the beginning of a story worth telling. Snoop Dogg settled into his new seat, which was far less plush than his usual spot but surprisingly comfortable. He leaned back, watching Ethan and his family from a distance. The little boy was grinning now, his cheeks flushed with color, as his mother adjusted the seatbelt around him. His father was explaining how to use the entertainment screen, his own face finally easing out of its perpetual worry. The sight warmed Snoop's heart. It wasn't every day he got to witness the immediate impact of a good deed. Still, something nagged at him. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his contacts. He needed to do more. "Yo, Taylor," he said into the phone after connecting with his assistant. "Find out everything you can about that family in row 3. See what we can do to help them out, but keep it on the down low. I don't want them to feel like a charity case." Taylor's voice was efficient as always. "On it, boss. Anything specific?" "Just make sure the little man gets what he needs," Snoop said, "and make it happen fast." After hanging up, Snoop leaned back and crossed his arms, satisfied. He looked out the window for a moment, his mind replaying the look on Ethan's face when he realized who Snoop was. That kid had probably been through more than most adults could handle, yet here he was, lighting up the cabin with his excitement. It was humbling. Meanwhile, up front, Ethan's joy was infectious. Passengers and flight attendants couldn't help but smile as they passed by, seeing the boy's animated reactions to every little luxury the seat offered. From the recliner buttons to the personalized menu, it was clear this was an experience he'd never forget. "Mom, look," Ethan exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "I can watch Spider-Man." His mother chuckled, brushing back his hair gently. "That's great, sweetheart. Just don't forget to rest a little. Okay." Across the aisle, Snoop watched quietly. It wasn't long before one of the other passengers, a middle-aged man in a business suit, approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Dogg," the man said, his tone polite but curious. "I just wanted to say, that was an incredible thing you did for that family. You don't see kindness like that every day." Snoop shrugged, a small grin playing on his lips. "Ain't nothing, man. Just doing what felt right." The man nodded, clearly impressed. "Well, it's inspiring. Thank you for reminding us that we can all make a difference." As the man returned to his seat, Snoop noticed others glancing his way, some smiling, others whispering. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. Usually people recognized him for his music, his movies, or his larger-than-life persona. But today they saw him as something more, a symbol of hope, a reminder of humanity's better side. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing that the plane would be landing soon. The cabin buzzed with activity as passengers began preparing for descent, but Snoop's eyes stayed on Ethan. The boy had dozed off, his head resting on his mother's shoulder, his tiny hand clutching the corner of the blanket. Snoop's chest tightened at the sight. For all the fame, money, and influence he had, moments like this reminded him of the things that truly mattered. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Snoop stood up and grabbed his carry-on bag. Before disembarking, he made his way to Ethan's family. "Hey, lil' man," Snoop said softly, crouching down next to the boy. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "You're leaving?" Ethan asked, his voice sleepy but tinged with disappointment. "Yeah, I gotta bounce," Snoop replied with a grin. "But I wanted to say goodbye first. You keep being strong, all right? And don't forget you got a whole lot of people rooting for you." Ethan nodded solemnly, his small hand reaching out to fist bump Snoop. His mother and father stood nearby, their eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you," the father said, his voice cracking. "You didn't have to do any of this, but you did. It means more than you know." Snoop smiled, giving the man a firm handshake. "Take care of your fam, man, that's what it's all about." As Snoop stepped off the plane, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know where this gesture would lead, but he was sure of one thing: it wasn't the end of the story. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, some holding cameras, others simply curious. Snoop slipped on his shades, flashing his signature smile. He knew the world would soon learn about Ethan, but that was okay. Maybe this story needed to be told. The airport terminal buzzed with life as passengers streamed out, many still chatting about what had happened on the plane. Ethan's family emerged into the crowd, with Ethan's father holding the oxygen tank and his mother gently guiding the boy, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder. They were about to fade into the anonymity of travel when they were stopped by a young woman holding a microphone, a cameraman trailing behind her. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice polite but insistent. "I couldn't help but notice the interaction on the plane. Can you tell us a little about what happened?" Ethan's father hesitated, glancing at his wife. She nodded, her expression soft but cautious. Well, he began, his voice uncertain, "It's not every day you meet someone like Snoop Dogg. He gave up his seat for our son so Ethan could be more comfortable." The reporter's eyes widened. "That's incredible. Why did he do it? Before the father could respond, Ethan spoke up, his voice small but clear. Because he's nice, he said simply, clutching his blanket tightly. He said, I'm strong. The mother's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged her son. The reporter, visibly touched, pressed further. And what does that mean to you, as a family? It means everything, the mother said, her voice trembling. We've been through so much, and for someone like Snoop to do something so selfless, it reminds us that there's still kindness in the world. As the family was led away to avoid further intrusion, the reporter turned back to the camera, her voice filled with emotion. In a world that often feels divided, it's moments like these that remind us of the power of compassion. Snoop Dogg's gesture wasn't just a seat on a plane, it was a message of hope. Meanwhile, back at his destination, Snoop scrolled through his phone, sipping a steaming cup of herbal tea. His assistant had just sent over an update. The family's story was spreading fast. A flight attendant had posted a picture of Ethan sitting in the plush seat, with Snoop standing nearby, his hand on the boy's shoulder. The caption read, "This is why we love Snoop Dogg. Compassion costs nothing, but its value is priceless." The post had gone viral within hours, amassing thousands of comments. Snoop chuckled as he read a few. Real one. We need more people like him. Not just a legend in music, a legend in life. Who else teared up reading this? Snoop put his phone down, shaking his head with a small smile. He hadn't done it for the attention. He'd done it because it was the right thing to do. Still, seeing the outpouring of positivity warmed his heart. Maybe this story would inspire others to step up in their own way. His phone buzzed with a new message from Taylor. Got more details on Ethan's family. Sending now. Snoop opened the file and skimmed through it. The family had been struggling to cover medical expenses for Ethan's treatment. His rare condition required specialized care, and though they had insurance, it didn't come close to covering everything. They were trying to make ends meet, selling off belongings and dipping into their savings. Snoop leaned back, deep in thought. It wasn't right for a kid to go through that, for a family to have to choose between keeping the lights on and saving their child. He picked up his phone and made another call. Taylor, I want to cover their medical bills, he said. Quietly. Set it up through a foundation or something, but make it happen. And don't let them know it's me. Taylor paused on the other end, her voice soft with admiration. You got it, boss. Snoop hung up, his mind racing. He had always believed that success wasn't just about what you had, it was about what you did with it. And if he could use his influence to ease someone's burden, even a little, then it was all worth it. Back at the airport, Ethan's family was sitting in the waiting area for their connecting flight when a stranger approached them. She was wearing a badge that read Airline Customer Service. Excuse me, she said with a warm smile, but the airline would like to upgrade your tickets to first class for the remainder of your journey, free of charge. The mother's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my goodness, she whispered. Thank you. But why? The representative hesitated, then smiled. Let's just say you've inspired a lot of people today. Ethan beamed, his small face lighting up like the sun. Did Snoop do that too? The representative chuckled. Maybe, she said, winking. You never know. As the family boarded their next flight, the ripple effect of Snoop's kindness was just beginning. Strangers shared the story, donations poured in for families in similar situations, and countless people around the world were reminded of the impact one act of compassion could have. Snoop Dogg may have given up a seat, but he gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest weight. By the time Ethan and his family reached their destination, the story had exploded across social media. What began as a heartfelt post from a flight attendant had turned into a global phenomenon. News outlets picked it up, celebrities retweeted it, and the hashtag SnoopCares trended for days. Inside a hospital room, where Ethan was being prepped for a consultation with a specialist, the family's phones buzzed nonstop. The mother tried to keep up with the influx of messages while her husband kept Ethan distracted with a coloring book. Look at this, she said, holding her phone toward her husband. It's an article about what happened on the plane. They're calling it the seat of kindness. Her voice trembled with emotion. People are saying it's inspired them to do more good. Her husband smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "It's incredible," he murmured. "We just wanted to get Ethan here safely. We never expected," he gestured vaguely at the phone. "All of this." Ethan, oblivious to the growing buzz around their story, looked up from his coloring. "Mom, can we watch Spider-Man again later?" She ruffled his hair, her heart aching with both love and worry. "Of course, sweetheart." The family didn't realize that things were about to change in ways they never could have imagined. Back in Los Angeles, Snoop Dogg found himself fielding an unusual amount of attention. Calls poured in from reporters, talk show hosts, and even his peers in the entertainment industry. Everyone wanted to talk about his act of kindness. True to form, Snoop remained humble. "It wasn't about me," he said during an impromptu interview. "It was about that little man and his family. They're the real heroes. I just did what I could." One call, however, caught his attention. It was from an executive at a major children's hospital, someone who had been deeply moved by the story. "Mr. Dogg," the executive began, "I represent an organization that works to provide medical care for children with rare illnesses, regardless of their ability to pay. We've been following the story of Ethan and his family, and we want to help, but we'd like your input." Snoop leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "What you got in mind?" "Well," the executive continued, "we'd like to establish a fund in Ethan's honor. Something that can help other families facing similar challenges. We'd love for you to be involved." For a moment, Snoop was silent, processing the weight of the offer. "You know what?" he finally said, his voice steady. "I'm down. Let's make it happen." At the hospital, the doctor's face broke into a rare smile as he entered the consultation room. "Ethan," he said warmly, crouching down to the boy's level, "how are you feeling today?" "Good," Ethan replied, though his voice was faint. The doctor turned to the parents, his tone shifting to professional. "We've reviewed Ethan's case thoroughly. The good news is that we have some promising treatment options. But I'll be honest, it's going to be a long road." The mother's breath hitched. "Is there any chance? I mean, will he be okay?" The doctor's expression softened. "We're going to do everything we can, and thanks to some recent developments, financial barriers won't be an issue." The parents exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" the father asked. The doctor hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "There's been a significant donation made to cover Ethan's treatment. I can't share the details, but let's just say you have a very special benefactor." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Was it?" The doctor smiled knowingly. Sometimes kindness finds a way to come full circle. As the days passed, Ethan's story continued to inspire. Videos of people performing random acts of kindness flooded social media, each one tagged with Snoop Cares. Strangers donated to the newly established Ethan Fund, and countless families benefited from the wave of generosity. For Ethan's family, life became a whirlwind. Media requests poured in, but they stayed focused on Ethan's health. They were grateful for the attention, but even more so for the outpouring of support. They didn't know the full extent of Snoop's involvement, but they carried his words with them: "Take care of your fam." That's what it's all about. As Ethan underwent his first round of treatment, he held onto a small stuffed dog, a gift from one of the nurses. "I named him Snoop," Ethan announced proudly, making the medical team chuckle. "Snoop?" the nurse asked. "Why?" "Because he's cool and he takes care of people," Ethan replied with a grin. His mother sat nearby, watching her son's resilience with quiet awe. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Meanwhile, Snoop stayed true to his word, avoiding the spotlight as much as possible. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The world had been reminded of its capacity for compassion, and he was determined to keep the momentum going. After all, a single act of kindness could change lives, and sometimes it could even change the world. Ethan's room was warm and filled with soft laughter. His parents were huddled near the window, speaking quietly with the nurse about his next treatment session. Ethan, however, was occupied with a new visitor, a staff member from the hospital's arts program who had brought him a set of paints and a blank canvas. "I've never painted before," Ethan said, his voice tinged with hesitation. "Well, there's a first time for everything," the staffer said with a smile. Let's see what you can do. Ethan dipped the brush into a vibrant blue paint, hesitating for a moment before sweeping it across the canvas. His face lit up with excitement. "It's like Spider-Man's suit," he exclaimed, glancing toward his mother for approval. She smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's perfect, sweetheart." As Ethan worked on his painting, his parents' phones buzzed on the windowsill. It had become a daily occurrence: emails from well-wishers, texts from friends who had seen the latest article, and donation updates from the Ethan Fund. Each message reminded them of how their lives had changed since that fateful flight. But today, one message stood out. Across the country, Snoop Dogg was seated in his sprawling home studio, surrounded by his team. The Ethan Fund had exceeded all expectations, with donations pouring in from every corner of the globe. Families with similar struggles were already receiving the help they desperately needed. Snoop leaned back in his chair, scrolling through a spreadsheet of updates from the fund. Each entry was a story: a little girl in Texas receiving life-saving surgery, a single mother in Ohio getting the support she needed to care for her son, a family in Florida no longer burdened by overwhelming medical bills. "Man, this is what it's all about," Snoop said, his voice quiet but firm. "Using what you got to lift others up." Taylor, his assistant, nodded. "You've started something big, boss. People are noticing." Snoop smirked. "Good. Now let's make sure it lasts." Back in the hospital, Ethan was proudly showing off his completed painting, a vibrant, abstract rendition of his favorite superhero. A knock at the door interrupted their moment, and the family turned to see a man in a suit carrying a small package. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter?" he asked. Ethan's father stepped forward, his expression wary but polite. "That's us." The man handed over the package. "This was sent anonymously, with instructions to deliver it directly to you." Ethan's mother opened the package cautiously, revealing a sleek tablet. The screen lit up, displaying a video message. She pressed play, and the family leaned in. Snoop's familiar face appeared on the screen, his signature smile lighting up the room. "What's up, Carter fam? It's your boy Snoop Dogg. I just wanted to check in and let y'all know how proud I am of you. Lil man, you're inspiring the world with your strength. Keep pushing, 8. Ethan's eyes widened in awe. "It's him. Mom, it's really him." The message continued. "Now I heard you've been painting, and I gotta say, I'm looking forward to seeing some masterpieces. Maybe you'll let me hang one in my crib someday. Stay strong, keep smiling, and remember you're never alone in this." As the message ended, Ethan's mother clutched the tablet to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "He didn't have to do this," she whispered. But he did. Ethan was already bouncing in his bed, his energy renewed. "I want to paint something for him. Can we send it to him, Mom?" His father smiled, his hand resting gently on Ethan's shoulder. "We'll find a way, buddy. We'll make sure he gets it." The story continued to spread, evolving into a movement. Inspired by Snoop's actions, celebrities and philanthropists stepped forward to contribute to the Ethan Fund, amplifying its reach. Social media buzzed with stories of everyday acts of kindness, each one a testament to the ripple effect of compassion. At the hospital, Ethan's painting became a symbol of resilience and hope. Staff and patients alike stopped by to admire his work, their spirits lifted by the boy's unyielding optimism. Snoop, for his part, stayed out of the limelight, focusing instead on growing the fund and ensuring its long-term impact. But every so often he'd receive a message from the Carters, an update on Ethan's progress, a photo of his latest masterpiece, or a simple note of gratitude. Late one evening, as he scrolled through pictures of Ethan smiling with his family, Snoop couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. It wasn't about the recognition or the accolades. It was about the connections, the moments that reminded people they weren't alone. The world had changed for Ethan and his family, but more importantly, it had changed for countless others, proving that even the smallest act of kindness could spark a fire that burned brighter than anyone could have imagined. Months had passed since that fateful flight, but the impact of Snoop Dogg's gesture continued to reverberate around the world. Ethan's story had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of compassion and humanity. For the Carter family, life had settled into a new rhythm, one marked by steady progress, unexpected joy, and a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan was thriving. His treatments, made possible by the funds raised through the Ethan Fund, had shown promising results. His once frail frame was stronger, his cheeks rosier, and his smile wider than ever. He'd even begun attending school part-time, where his story had made him a local celebrity among his classmates. Mom, Ethan said one evening as he sat at the kitchen table, working on another painting. His fingers were smudged with streaks of green and gold, his eyes bright with concentration. "Do you think Snoop will like this one?" His mother glanced over, her heart swelling with pride. The painting was of a sprawling garden under a golden sky, a small dog sitting in the foreground. "He's going to love it, sweetheart," she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's beautiful." Ethan grinned. "I'm going to send it to him and tell him thank you for everything." Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Snoop Dogg was preparing for a special event. The Ethan Fund had grown beyond anything he'd imagined, evolving into a full-fledged foundation dedicated to providing financial and emotional support to families dealing with pediatric illnesses. Tonight, the foundation was hosting its first gala, a celebration of the lives it had touched and the hope it continued to spread. The venue buzzed with excitement as guests arrived, dressed in their finest attire. Among them were doctors, nurses, philanthropists, and families who had benefited from the fund's efforts. The Carters were there too, with Ethan proudly wearing a small suit and tie. His eyes sparkled as he looked around, overwhelmed by the grandeur of it all. "This is amazing," his mother whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "I can't believe we're here." Ethan tugged at his father's hand, pointing toward the stage. "Do you think Snoop will talk to us?" "I'm sure he'll want to see you, buddy," his father replied with a smile. As the night unfolded, guests shared stories of how the fund had changed their lives. Videos played on large screens, showing clips of children receiving treatment, families reunited, and communities rallying together. The room was filled with laughter, tears, and applause, each moment a reminder of the foundation's mission. When it was finally time for Snoop Dogg to take the stage, the crowd erupted into cheers. Dressed in a sleek black suit, his signature swagger tempered by the weight of the moment, Snoop stepped up to the microphone. "Yo, what's up, Wyle?" he began, his voice carrying warmth and humility. "First off, I just want to thank everyone in this room. Y'all are the real MVPs making this dream a reality." The audience clapped and Snoop continued. "This all started with one lil homie Ethan. And look where we at now. We got kids getting the help they need, families getting support, and a whole lot of love spreading across the world. That's what it's about." He gestured toward the Carters, who were seated near the front. "Ethan, my man, come on up here." Ethan's eyes widened as his parents urged him forward. He climbed the steps to the stage, clutching his painting tightly. Snoop crouched down to his level, smiling as he accepted the artwork. "This yours?" Snoop asked. Ethan nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I made it for you. To say thank you." Snoop looked at the painting, his expression softening. "Man, this is fire. I'm hanging this up where everybody can see it. Thank you, lil man." The crowd erupted into applause as Snoop hugged Ethan, the moment captured by cameras and etched into the hearts of everyone present. It was a perfect encapsulation of everything the night stood for: connection, gratitude, and the boundless potential of kindness. As the gala wound down, the Carters found themselves surrounded by well-wishers. Strangers shared their admiration, children posed for pictures with Ethan, and staff members offered heartfelt encouragement. For the first time in years, the family felt a sense of normalcy, a life no longer defined by struggle, but by hope. Later that night, as they prepared to leave, Ethan tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, do you think I can be like Snoop someday?" She knelt down, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "You already are, sweetheart. You've made the world a better place just by being you." Ethan smiled, his small hand slipping into hers. Together they stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever came next. In the days that followed, stories from the gala spread far and wide. Social media buzzed with photos and videos, each one a testament to the power of community. The Ethan Fund continued to grow, fueled by donations and inspired by the kindness that had sparked its creation. As for Snoop Dogg, he remained true to his roots, using his platform to amplify the voices of those in need. But whenever he glanced at Ethan's painting, now proudly displayed in his home, he couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of fulfillment. It was a reminder of a simple truth: one small act could create waves of change, transforming lives in ways no one could predict. And so, the legacy of that flight, a seat given up for a sick child, became much more than a story. It became a movement, a call to action, and proof that kindness, no matter how small, could truly change the world.